and welcome to the 5th Chief Delegate meeting. I'm Michael O'Sullivan, and I'm chairing the meeting today. Unfortunately, our colleague Brock Pierce is either running late or has not been able to make it, but we did change the meeting this week, so that's potentially understandable. I hope everyone's had a good week, and to start things off with, I'm just going to briefly share my screen so you can see the agenda. And so today's meeting, obviously just greetings. I would like to start with the usual 2-minute update from each CD. Obviously, if we're one down, that will only run for 8 minutes. Then I would like to go over the Eden Treasury membership reports, and also set a motion, or basically explore the notion of putting Eden into some form of legal trust. I'd like to look over the proposed Eden membership service and governance and how we fund that, which will be an open debate. And then I will look at the governance layer of EOS, and how we should, and if we should vote on certain elements of the EOS sector and individuals within it, in particular those with prominence. And then also it'd be nice to discuss other areas of interest for the CDs in terms of, areas of ratification and generally areas of governance and oversight. So it'd be cool to get you guys' feedback on that. So yeah, to start off with the 2-minute update, who would like to go first?
I can go first really quick, if that's okay.
Sure.
So I want to provide an update on the Eden Delegate accounting standard. I'm going to share my screen, Michael, if you can help me out with that. Just quickly on what we've accomplished in the last couple of weeks. First, we have the GitHub is ready under currently EOS Costa Rica, but this would be moved under the Eden GitHub, where we document what the Eden accounting standard is, what transaction memo formats we'll be using, and also include some screenshots for it. We've also secured the domain eosreports.com, where we've updated the started a boilerplate and a development environment to do so, and also sharing some wireframes of what we preview this to be. So not sure if you can see that. Here, let me try again.
Yeah, we could see it.
Oh, you could?
Sorry, I was muted. I was saying, yeah.
Oh, okay, let me try again here. Because this is really what I want to get feedback from the community on really quick. This is the where we're coining EDAS, or Eden Delegate Accounting Standard tool. Something we could integrate directly into the tool or make it a standalone, as I mentioned in eosreports.com. You would see expenses by delegate, expenses by category, expenses over time by delegate, over the mandate, and then the tool itself, as I've mentioned before, you would be able to claim the amount similar to how we claim right now as a delegate. However, you'd be selecting a category and then putting a description in. This automatically would create the memo field standard that would then feed into this business intelligence. So that's what we're trying to do. I think it's important, as I've mentioned before, to really understand where we're spending, why we're spending, and where we want to spend. This is not a penny pinching or a finger pointing initiative or tool or witch hunt. This is much more of a business intelligence of where are we spending, was that a correct decision, and where should we spend more perhaps. So that's the progress that Adania has made using my delegate funds, and hopefully we have more progress next week. I will be posting this in the forum and receiving feedback from the community. Appreciate your feedback as well. Thank you.
Chuck or Gracie?
Oh, no. I'm thankful, Edgar, that Sortition picked you. You're doing a great job with that. Thank you. So my week update, I met with several people locally, setting up more speaking events, seminar type structure, trying to get it more focused on explaining what's going on in 10 minutes on what blockchain is, and then the rest of it in what Eden is and what EOS is. I'm doing more work on onboarding and engagement print material, and also building the tools with a couple of other people to help to automate the building of print material. I'm working with another Eden member on a project for engagement. And on Sunday, I participated in the Eden Town Hall event with Michael, spoke about potential for Eden and our next steps. I actively participated in community discussions on Telegram throughout the week, met with the Eden, I guess Joshua's Eden group on Wednesday morning, speaking about ways particularly to increase member engagement. Spoke on the ENF's, go ahead, take the cookie. Yeah. Spoke with the ENF's fireside chat on Wednesday, the Twitter Spaces, giving a general introduction about Eden and then through to more recent news. Began collaboration with some Eden members on a direction for an NFT engine or publishing house or NFT sphere or whatever. We're exploring 2D and 3D NFT designs for membership engagement and other incentives. And amazingly still found enough time to get wrecked this week. So there we go.
And to Gracie.
Okay. Hello. First, I will share some information from the recent EDMCN's Delegates meeting. And the projects from the last 12 election were all complete as their promise. And so the delegates are ready to confirm the transfer of their funds from EDMCN's account to the project. And we are preparing for the next election. And the EDA we talk about next week, it's like the first bi-weekly consensus meeting will be held tomorrow. And then we will see how the test system works. And I built a talent pool and a job board this week. We'll open for the community to submit CVs and job descriptions next week. Currently, we only accept members or projects who working language is Chinese. If everything goes well, we might reach out to other communities in other language and see if anyone needs this kind of service too. And there's another thing. It's this week we test the performance of Eden ManLab, see how it works, because we heard a lot of complaints from the community, and we also just encounter some errors when we deploy the system, just like transition too long or some error like that. So we ran several tests. We just push different actions every 10 seconds and then see what will happen, just like that, easy. And then you will not gonna believe it. Just sometimes the action failure rate was up to 30%, just more than 30% action. It's fail. And then I'm thinking of like, we have been discussing how to attract devs back to EOS, how to create killer devs, and how to get community involved, how to make better governance, like this kind of things. But if most BPs, they doesn't provide the services they should provide, and they just use the cheap server, just instead of the recommended one. And just think, maybe they are thinking of saving more money and just put into their own pocket. And people will be pushed away by everything. All this happen on EOS minute. Because when you're using it and then just comes from no reason and then it's some error and cannot transfer, can you take an action, you push a button, nothing respond. It's really bad. I think we should think of this problem maybe later or someday. Yeah, that's my update. Thank you.
100%, Gracie. I mean, that's one thing I'd add to that is, during our test for the Eden accounting standard, we need to access the member table of Eden. And for that, you need a Hyperion history node. And EOS mainnet only has one running, that's EOS Sweden, and they're basically not even in the pay pool. So we can talk about all the things we want to build and all these killer dApps and all these great governance tools. If we don't have the underlying infrastructure, as you're pointing out, it's all for naught, right? I mean, it's really just a waste of time. And so then when we sit back and we say that we're not going to comment or talk about governance or infrastructure in mainnet, we're just shooting ourselves in the foot. I completely agree with you, Gracie. It's quite the shame, and really highlights, when should Eden have to run its own infrastructure for this to work, right? Do we have to run our own history nodes and our own nodes to process our transactions? And if so, why as a community are we paying VPs to do so, right? And I would actually call out the ENF saying, well, we don't get involved in politics. We don't get involved in voting with the pool of tokens they have. Well, it's coming back and it's affecting everybody. You can't just sit on the sidelines anymore. I completely agree. Thank you for your update, Gracie.
Whew. Okay. This is the biggest start I think we've had to a meeting. Excellent. I love a bit of passion. So it's fantastic. My update won't be as exciting as Gracie's. So we've obviously launched the Twitter Spaces, and we've launched the Eden Discord. We've got back control of, I think it's edeneos.org, the main site. I spoke with Ray at length. He's the lovely guy, and he's going to give us the access to the server or whatever, repoint the domain anytime. So we're going to build a new version of the website so we can update it. And I was speaking with Ray, and if you guys agree, I think adding a content management system to the front end of that website just makes sense, because it still says the next election's on the 9th of April. So just little things like a basic CMS so we can update the election dates would be very helpful. The eden.genesis.community stuff where the election portal is held, that I think that's still in Fractally's control. So that one's a bit more problematic. We've also launched the Eden Discords, and I've been working on my Treasury report, putting together the basic Treasury report, and also a Eden member service outline, and trying to secure some more funding for the various departments. And hopefully that will alleviate some of the concerns that Gracie and Edgar and many others in the community have rightly voiced. So that's my update for today. So the next item on the agenda is the Eden Treasury Members Report. So I'm just going to briefly share my screen. So I'll basically put this together weekly unless other people think it should be done less regularly. And there's a link to it in the agenda. So basically the data was collected on May the 10th and was compiled May 13th. So I did it last night. So we currently have 420 members. Since this is the first week we're tracking, I can't tell you what the increase is, but I can next week. The next Eden elections are on July 9, as we know, and there's going to be 23 participants so far. The current Treasury has 209,139 EOS. The available balance of that is 181,815, which works out at just under $250,000. And unclaimed EOS delegates funds was $37,000 approximately as of May 10. So please note that given the change in the bylaws enacted on May the 5th, the level of remuneration for each CD has now been equalized, along with changing of the election date. Therefore, the HCD, so Edgar, was overpaid 3,189.756 EOS, and therefore must return 2,551 EOS in the form of direct payments to each chief delegate, which works out 637.95012 EOS, which is the redistribution of that. So I think, Edgar, you'll have to, I don't know if you're still there or you're on daddy duty at this second, but you're going to...
I'm here.
Okay, cool. So you're going to have to redistribute 637 EOS to each of the delegates in line with the bylaws. You can do that at your own leisure. If you've got any questions about that, or if I've done the maths wrong, I did it at 3 a.m. last night, let me know, but I think that's broadly correct. The anticipated Treasury drawdown is as such. Should there be no changes to the Treasury, the drawdown will happen like this, and this is the month-by-month breakdown of how it now breaks down with the equalized HCD pay. In general, I think it'd be a good idea to do risks or warnings or any anticipating problems. And the only problem I can see as a treasurer is obviously the price of EOS continuing to decline. At the time of writing this, or since the beginning of the year, we've seen a 43% reduction in its value versus USD. Obviously, that doesn't affect the Treasury Department in its current state because we pay out in EOS. But over the long term, it will reduce each delegate's buying power, and that will affect, obviously, our ambitions to grow and to scale EOS. So for the gods who control the prices, it would be better if the price was higher. So that's currently where we stand. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, one comment around that risk and warnings. I mean, I agree. What do we think about, hedging the price? I mean, requiring people that if they actually receive funds and claim it, that they hedge that price. Seeing that if they've already have a budget approved or in mind, and that's what they ran on, and that's what they're going to do. Holding the EOS and being subject to market decline is somewhat of a gamble, right? What do people think about hedging that price, especially if you've already got an approved budget? I bring it up because, for example, Pomelo grants, when you're granted funds in EOS and you have a budget in USD, for example, the delegate or that organization might gamble and say, hey, it might double. So I'll just spend it at that and then keep the other value, right? Same goes for the other way around. Oh, I couldn't execute because, well, EOS went down. So that's why. So hedging kind of brings it up. I think, in corporate governance and corporate risk management, that's what you do. It's not a question of when or how, it's you hedge because that's where your output is. You don't gamble with public funds. So that's one thing I wanted to bring up. I mean, what do we think about that? I mean, I know we'd love everybody to accept EOS and we don't have to worry about it, but that's not currently the case.
So I have two distinct opinions on this. So my opinion as the treasurer is I support it fully. I think hedging is a logical position and it will safeguard the value of our funds. And as treasurer, I agree with that fully. But then as a chief delegate, I disagree with it because it is difficult and very politically loaded because we are demonstrating some fear in our own currency that we're trying to promote. I mean, a reasonable fear given the market, but if we don't even trust it fully ourselves, how can we expect others? But I'm kind of split on the issue. So I would like to hear maybe from Gracie on this and then Chuck.
Sorry. I actually think hedge is a good idea because it's not it's a public treasure, so we need to make sure it will not just get so infected of the market price. So that's a better way. That will make people will be sure that how much is the amount, and then what should we do with all this sure amount, not always, sometimes are so high and sometimes are low, and then we are not sure what we can do with that. That's not really good. That's my opinion.
Yeah, is this something, Edgar, you're talking about at an organizational level? Hedging should be done?
No, at the
by individual delegates, yes. Okay.
Correct. By individual delegates, you claim, you hedge, you mark that possibly in the accounting standard as hedged, or you move it to an exchange and you say, look, I hedged at this amount. It wouldn't be at the treasury level. And Michael, to your concern, risk is a two-way thing, right? We usually associate risk with downside, but risk is upside as well. So you would be giving upside. I don't think you're necessarily indicating to the market that you don't trust your currency because you're hedging. Mostly because your next month is also in EOS. We're not hedging the treasury, right? You're not hedging future payments. So you're actually very much working towards that token price to go up. What you're hedging is cash flow, and that's the current month's claim. So I don't think you're actually necessarily sending a bad signal to the market because most of your assets are still in EOS. You're just hedging your cash flow needs for that month.
So I just wanted to ask, like, generally speaking, is most most contract work, is it usually priced in US dollars? And we're paying out basically in a stable coin, or we're paying out in a US dollar equivalency in EOS? Is that what most people are doing?
I would say US dollars or euros, but yes, I think it's invoiced. It could be paid in EOS, right? It's just paid at the market rate. But yes, in my opinion. Michael, not sure in Europe or Gracie, Asia, if that's the case.
Now, if that's the case, would it make sense to for the Treasury itself to pay out a portion of delegate funding in EOS and a portion in some other currency? Would that make sense? That hedged?
Well, that would be putting the responsibility on the Treasury itself to do the hedge, and I don't think that's just not. It would have to be a whole bylaw kind of thing, right? And it's taking on too much responsibility, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it would be you'd need a specialist then to manage that level of Treasury assets and hedge it correctly. My only concern would be, what if the individual hedged it incorrectly and kind of lost their delegation funds? You know, is everyone competent at being able to hedge? I guess we could provide some guidance on that.
That's kind of the question that I'm getting at there is if we're you know, if it's an expectation or a recommendation to hedge, and then people make the wrong decisions. It's, you know, it's a more conservative type of gambling, you could say, right? But without knowing what you're doing, it would still be effectively gambling, the same result as gambling.
I would say it would be a recommendation, and then you'll be able to tag your claims as being hedged or not, and then kind of see how many people do hedge and how many don't, how many feel it's too complicated, and kind of learn and iterate from that. But I think just the same way as Michael's saying, you know, these are the risks and warnings, you know, to our delegates, we should say, we're experiencing market volatility. If you want to execute your things, you know, you should hedge to your cash flow needs.
Your expertise in that area, like if you could say to, you know, the individual delegates who are receiving funds right now, what you're talking about in straight up terms, what would you tell them to do or recommend?
As soon as the funds are available, claim and hedge to your functional currency. That's dollars, if that's euros, if that's yen or any other, for that month, for until the next claim, right? That would be my recommendation. What does that mean? You move it to an exchange account and you put that into a stable coin or fiat, hopefully a stable coin, right? That would be my recommendation.
Edgar, would it be possible to add that as a feature on your accounting software? So when you're withdrawing, you could, you know, this is how you could hedge, or there could be a section on hedging or something. 100%.
Actually, that's where I was going at. Right now, what we want to do in this phase is sort of like a checkbox hedge, like hedge question. So we get to just get the data. We're not really, you know, it's kind of on a trust basis if you actually did or not, you know. But eventually, what would be awesome was connect to an API through hopefully a DEX or something. That would be amazing to have, where you could claim and just get stablecoin already, right? But that's more phase 2, phase 3. I mean, that would be amazing to have kind of an Eden powered community exchange or something where we all kind of commit liquidity pool to or something like that. But for phase 1, we're just wanting to gather data, seeing, hey, how many delegates actually would hedge if they had that? And that would just be a kind of a checkbox we'd use to gather that data.
One of the things, Edgar, I was alluding to in asking, you know, what we think about the Treasury doing that hedging, taking that responsibility on a larger scale is, like, once these funds hit our individual accounts, we've got tax implications sometimes for every transaction we do, right? Every time we go from EOS to a stable coin, we might have a taxation event there, right? If it was coming straight from Treasury as a stable coin, there might be serious advantages to the individual delegates that way.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, anytime you claim, you're entering into a tax event, whether you hedge or not. But Chuck, I agree that, you know, making this easy and simple, I think that would be something we should be moving towards, right? Treasury management in a more institutional way. I think for phase 1, just kind of gathering data and learning is a right step.
Yeah, that sounds good, Edgar. I would support that. Does anyone else have any questions or anything else on that subject? No? Okay. So moving on to point 5, which is a motion or a vote preceding the exploration of making Eden a legal trust. The only reason I bring this up, and I'm aware that the other CDs did discuss this at length, it's just because I believe we're going to need some sort of legal entity to place some assets into. For example, domain names. Once Fractally and others have volunteered the domain names to us kindly, we do need a place to put them. If we assign just a CD, that's a temporary solution because that CD will obviously change over time. We could think about an Eden member services assigned to an individual, but one individual is always going to be a bottleneck or a point of contention or a problem in the future. So it's not an area of expertise for me, but if anyone can speak to how you would go about setting up a trust, what territory would be in, and if anyone wants to take the lead in looking into that, that would be very interesting.
So I've got some thoughts on that. I think, and somewhat not conflicted, but still need some time to think about that because there are some pros and there are some cons. Hopefully, in terms of domains, I would love to get like eden.dao, and then it's just a multi-sig. We don't even have to, have a domain name service, right? And that's what we should be investigating as well as having a Web3 domain. But I know there are going to be some assets that do have to be held in a legal entity. I wouldn't move Eden completely to be a legal entity, but just have sort of an arm that it has to have that friction with, let's just call it the real world in a sense. It also would be a great marketing kind of splash because we could get some press coverage of, a legal entity or DAO establishing a legal entity. I know a lot of DAOs that have done so have gotten a lot of recognition. Eden could be a beneficiary of that. And in terms of jurisdiction, Wyoming is one of the friendliest in the United States. I know Uruguay and Latin America. New Zealand, I believe, has a legal structure where you can have a DAO incorporated. That's the Dash DAOs in New Zealand, I believe. Not sure in Europe, maybe Switzerland and Zug is part of those jurisdictions. Maybe Singapore, I'm not sure in Asia, but we'd be looking into that. I know that there are going to be legal costs. I think we'd have to weigh the pros and cons. Definitely something we could move into, right? I think there's some things. The cons there is anytime you have a legal entity, you have regulators, you have tax authorities, you have a central point of failure against people coming after what's supposed to be a decentralized autonomous organization community, right? So we want to make sure that it's not necessarily an entire community, just where we keep some assets and really think about whether we're attracting the right type of attention and from the right people.
Yep, I would agree with that. I'm definitely conflicted. There's definitely pros and cons. I think the legal pros probably make it a necessity, but I think if it was limited in scope, then it could work. I wonder if Chuck and Gracie have any thoughts on this.
From everything I've been hearing, a jurisdiction that recognizes a DAO as a person, like Wyoming does. I don't know much about the other jurisdictions. In fact, I don't know much about Wyoming, but I just know what I've been hearing, and it sounds like a very attractive possibility. And it seems like since we are sort of we're by definition a cutting edge blockchain entity, it might make sense for us to just explore these things without any, without putting too many potential consequences into them, right? Why don't we work on spinning up a couple of organizations just to see what is entailed, right? And then maybe we could offer that as a service to other DAOs, for example. Like, if we have the expertise to execute things, maybe it's something that we could help other organizations in our community to do. If we have a group of Eden members who want to start up a trust and they don't have the wherewithal to do it, maybe because we have blazed this trail, maybe we can help them to do it, right? I don't think there's much to lose with just learning. Edgar, James Mart rather said, we were talking about tearing into the Eden code itself, and I'm like, is this something we should do? Are we wasting energy and time doing this? And he was like, no. The more people who can tear into smart contract code and learn about it, the better, right? And if we can just, if this is another example of something that we all need to learn about, why don't we just get our hands dirty and build something, with very, very little, there's what's the worst that can happen? We're not putting the organization's treasury into it. We're not tying anything else to it. We're spinning up a DAO or an LLC or whatever it is that is essentially disposable, right? So there's and like Eva's encouraging us to do, like, just iterate, just try shit, right? So why don't we just do it, right? And then we can decide what assets we're going to put into it later. But for right now, why don't we just work on it, right? I think we could have a motion right now to just spin one up, because we've talked about it forever as Eden, and I think maybe we should just go.
Yeah, I would second that motion. But if Gracie, do you want to speak to it before we put forward the motion? I think you're muted.
Okay. I kind of I prepare more, just working more on the decentralized organization DAO, something governance things first, and then after that we will see if we need to get involved in some legal things, because for me everything, even it's legal, it sounds illegal. so I'm prefer more on working on the decentralized part, and then make it really go like the way we decide to do Eden at the beginning. Just we all read M's book, and we trust the thing she read in the book, and then definitely it's not this way, right? So maybe we can try it the way we want first.
So Gracie, just to push back a little bit, then if we do need to put some assets into some form of legal ownership, how would you suggest we do so without any legal entity?
I'm not so sure of this part yet. Maybe I need to think about it later, and then.
Michael, just refresh. So what assets are you speaking about? Just the domains, like social media handles, or just so we have that clear.
Yeah.
And then maybe we reach out to see who in the community has legal expertise about this, and maybe we don't have to incur into some legal costs or anything, but really just kind of open up the discussion, saying, yes, this is something we should explore. The motion is to explore. I agree with Gracie. I think we've got a lot of different priorities than creating legal entities and some possible headaches. But sorry, Michael, what are the specific assets you're mentioning, so we can kind of debate them?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, the domain names, on the conversation I had with Ray regarding edeneos.org, he's happy to hand that over, but who does he hand it over to? And in general, I think if there was some sort of organization or some sort of trust or multi-sig or something that all the assets could belong to, then the succession or the handover process would be a lot more easier and a lot more formulatic, when we would need this drama every time. Every time there's an election every 3 months, basically. So maybe we should put forward a motion to form a committee to look into this, to see the pros and cons, and to assess the viability of a trust. Would anyone second that motion?
I think we've got a lot of committees. Maybe we could form a committee and empower them with the directive of forming a trust. Like maybe rather than explore it, maybe we can just say, don't do it tomorrow, but maybe the point of the team is to form a trust, and then we can, it might cost us like a few $100 to do it, and we'd have to obviously set it up so that it has no repercussions on the organization as a whole. But I mean, we're a blockchain entity, so really, we have, what's the worst that could happen? The worst that could happen is we put the wrong assets into that new organization and it gets seized by some authority, right? Is that the worst that can happen? Is there anything worse than that? Or the authority somehow decides that they now have leverage over the greater DAO? Is that the worst that can happen? What is the worst that can happen out of a trust, even with a trust with zero assets in it? Because the first step is to create the trust, and then the second step is to DAO it. So what is the worst that can happen from just forming a trust right now, having a motion to form a legal trust, and does anybody have an idea of what's the worst that can happen? Is that something that we can just go and empower them to do right now?
This first question is, right, you form any legal entity, you have to set a set of directors, right? You have to put an address down. You have to put a telephone number down. You have to define people and you have to give IDs, right? Who's going to do that, right? Who's going to put their name? And if it's 3 months that we're doing elections every 3 months, are we going to change directors every 3 months? So I don't really think it's viable at this point. I think it's important that we do kind of plant the flag in certain things that move, right? If DAOs are going to be the corporations of the future, if networks are going to be the companies of the future, well, then that's something we have to explore. But right now, I don't know. I mean, are we going to be putting our names and addresses and numbers and social security numbers and IDs down for this entity? Because there's no such thing as an anonymous entity anymore. So if we had this motion and let's say we put a committee and they say, yeah, we should do it, then what's the next step, right? I mean, I've incorporated several companies and it might, not be that expensive. I think we can afford it, but who are we going to put down, right? Whose home address are we going to use, right?
So I guess that was why I suggested an investigative committee to see the viability of it, to to answer those questions that Edgar rightly put forward, and then to just assess the viability and also the value, right? Is there a value of doing this? Is there not a value of doing this? Obviously, we could potentially use Web3 domains to handle some of the domain issues and stuff. But it'd be nice if we could make some progress on this situation, or come up with an alternative that we could leave for the next incarnation.
Is there anybody here who would want to be that committee lead? Or do we know of anybody who would want to do this in the community? Or should we just put an invitation out to the community?
Well, I think we should put an invitation down. Maybe this is something Brock could help us with. I mean, he's looked into, several foundations and different blockchain projects. I know that there is a specific DAO that used EOS.io that was one of the first DAOs incorporated in Wyoming, called the American DAO. He also, last 2 meetings, we talked about a community engagement or public engagement kind of committee, starting events and such. Those events are going to need an entity, right? To hire people, to hire venues, to hire vendors, etc. That might be, and setting up a DAO is also kind of public engagement and community engagement. So I would kind of say, Michael, maybe we try the small committee is us right now. Let's talk about that. Hopefully we can get, I'd like to get Brock's input on this. I think he could bring a lot to the table, and then decide whether we want to formalize this with a separate committee, or maybe it rolls into this public engagement committee that we talked about 2 meetings ago.
Yep, that sounds good. All right. So with Brock in attendance next week, we'll further this discussion then with the next chair's blessing. Okay, so I want to move on now to the next part, which is my proposed Eden membership service and how it could work. So I'm just going to share my screen. So I'm not sure if you guys had a chance to see this, but basically I've been trying to take on board the views of the community, try and understand and try and build a system that would have the flexibility to provide everyone with a fair remuneration for their time, but also to give each department the resources it needs, and also the governance it needs to function both freely, but also with some oversight. So I'm just going to talk you through how it could potentially work, and then afterwards we could just have a debate about it. You can tell me it's rubbish or whatever. So effectively, this grey circle here, this represents the CD. So this is us. This is our overview. The pinky orange color, those are the EDEM members. So EDEM members obviously decide who the chief delegates are through elections, and then the delegates, chief delegates, would have control over everything within these circles. Each circle operates independently, but there are connecting elements to each circle, and each circle would be funded independently as well. Now, this is just suggestions and spitballing, so nothing is locked in, but I'll just talk you through how it could work. So at the moment we have the Treasury. The Treasury is basically receives funds from the ENF, and it sends funds to the chief delegate. So any green line like that is a fund going to or from. There's an arrow for direction. And at the moment the Treasury signs monthly budgets and ensures the financial continuity of EDEN. We have the BPs. They effectively have two lines. So this orange line here represents what a suggested political oversight. So, well, that's a reality oversight. So the BPs decide how much funding goes to the ENF and who should run the ENF. And the ENF is a hierarchical structure with sort of Eve, Zach, and Ted and Jeff, and then sort of the rest of the team below it. And then that's the board who control the ENF. Then you've got obviously the circles we've discussed briefly, so marketing and new business, and these will break down into each of its composite parts. So you could have influencers, membership growth, brand awareness, social media growth, even as a software solution. And the idea is these individual circles will form their own consensus, decide how their budgets are used. So these are kind of roles that need to be filled, but they can be filled by one or more individual. So Chuck, for example, you might take the lead on Eden as a software solution and membership growth, but you might also work in, the Eden as a software solution on the tech side of things as well. You might not be, you might not deliver the tech, but you might add it as a project manager or whatever. So the idea is the individual can cross between all circles. The black lines are effectively how something's achieved. So we have a new mission statement, right? Create value for the EOS ecosystem. So that's delivered through improving our tech infrastructure. It's also delivered through marketing and business. And that's all around the basis of growing Eden on EOS. So through membership, through promotion, through value. Press and PR obviously provide media updates to the press and grow media coverage of EOS itself and Eden. This would represent the delegates. They would have a more defined role. So those roles would be to potentially lead specific circles or define them, to spend their stipends or their remuneration on Pomelo donations, which I know many wish to do, but also CD oversight. So if all the delegates, or 2/3+1, come together, they could stop a tyrannical group of CDs from running the organization and call a snap election, making sure that then they're invested in the organization. So you see here, this line would be CDs having a political influence over, delegates having a political influence over CDs. So the new areas I am suggesting are that through adding value to the EOS ecosystem, we do that through EOS governance, and then EOS governance gets to decide or have an influence through our voting mechanism, how the Treasury spends its money, how much money goes back and forth between members and the Treasury, because obviously members pay into the Treasury, but also the EOS governance should have a layer where we can vote about block producers. So if there are block producers who are not fulfilling their needs, then we should be able to have a say on that. We should also be able to vote and ratify the ENF's leadership and potentially their processes. And this one I'm not too sure about, but maybe we should also vote on the ENF board, although I quite like maybe not voting on the board and having the board as a separate entity, but still kind of controlled overall by the CDs. And then basically, yeah, everything will just break down into its own individual, circle within that. And then you can have a circle within a circle, which will have the individuals who would run those specific functions. And the idea is there's no real hierarchy here that outside the democratic control. So obviously the CDs were elected, so we have, we can vote on these issues. The members vote on us, but we're not being too radical either. We're not changing the composite makeup of how the BPs currently work. We're just providing some democratic oversight, and we're not changing how the ENF works because it's working well and it's dynamic and it needs to be fluid. But all of these organizations can intertwine and operate freely between each other. And obviously we'd have Pamela in there as well, but this is kind of the first draft. Now, to make all of this work, I've put together some numbers. So the pre-bylaws, this was our basic distribution. HCD would get the same as all CDs divided up, and the delegates would get approximately 134 EOS. Post bylaws, this changes to a normalized level, so that slows out the burn a bit. But what I'm suggesting, I've got two proposals. First proposal is that we don't spend 5% per month, we actually spend 15% of our budget per month, and that would provide us with 2 months left of our term, and it will also provide 6 months for the next lot of CDs. So one term of CDs here, another term of CDs here, before the Treasury would run out of cash. So that's 8 months for the organization to demonstrate its worth, to demonstrate itself to the ENF and to the members. And I think the way it would work is, instead of having the salaries a proportion of the Treasury, we would fix the salaries of delegates and chief delegates. So chief delegates would earn 1,200 EOS. It slightly descends just to make the numbers work in this model. And each delegate would earn 115 EOS per month. And that would free up then each month a certain amount, which could then be pushed towards the circle. So if we voted and we started this from June, the delegate cost would be 8,760 with in EOS. Then you would have 18,512 EOS available to spend on the various different circles. So the first circle could be marketing. You'd have 9,000 EOS to spend on marketing that month. The second one could be tech, so that would go to Edgar's software, it would go to the code optimization, to go to the EOS as a software. And then you could have PR, admin, and support. So this is like a 20%, 30%, and a 50% split. Those are relatively arbitrary. We can have as many circles as we want, and we can divide the excessive amount of balance remaining once we deduct the fixed amount delegate remuneration as we see fit. And that would give us a lot more flexibility to actually do things. And then if we really wanted to go for it, we could request or vote that the ENF to double the current Treasury. And should they do so, that would provide us with effectively a year of runway with substantial tools at our behest to make these changes. So keeping the delegate costs the same. For example, if we voted this in and this came into effect into June, the marketing circle would have almost 23,000 EOS to operate with. The tech circle would have 13,735 EOS to operate with, and admin and PR would have 9,000 EOS to work with. And that would descend, and obviously you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, so you've got a whole year's worth of chief delegates, 4 individual chief delegates, 4 sets, sorry, to come into office and to ensure that the continuity is there and to have their say in it as well. And we would have a year then to demonstrate to the world that we can make this work with real budgets. And also, more importantly, no one's working for free, and the pressure to give up your own income in the name of Eden is taken away. I don't believe anyone should be forced to work for free. And it would also provide delegates with the opportunity to commit to work and put some hours in and actually earn some cash without fear that that would damage the work that they want to do. So if you were in a marketing circle, for example, you guys would make your own consensus on how that 22,000 EOS was spent, and you do that each month. After all, we are a consensus making organization. But the CDs obviously would be able to overrule should they need to, and obviously then the delegates could overrule the CD should there be a need to, with the voting mechanism, and of course the members can as well. So that's basically in a nutshell. So it's a pretty radical thoughts. I would love to hear your ideas.
Well, first, thank you, Michael, for obviously you put in a lot of thought and a lot of work into this, a lot of hours, and I think that definitely shows. On 2 things. One, on the governance side, you pointed out how the current BPs are the ones that vote for the ENF, right? Or that assign, attribute, whatever, appoint the ENF and provide inflation to the ENF, right? And then the ENF provides funds to Eden, or at least under this proposal. And then Eden is supposed to have an oversight over the governance. And I feel like, to what Gracie and I pointed out at the beginning of this call, clearly there are some value extractors in the BPs. Clearly there are people that are not running infrastructure at all, or running very cheap infrastructure, or just kind of collecting a paycheck, right? And trying to skate by. These are the same people that are appointing the ENF, that are the same people that are then funding Eden, that then we're supposed to kind of not regulate, but govern upon. There's something that's broken there. I think the fundamental thing that is broken is the BP layer, the DPOS layer. That's fundamentally broken. So we can have all the, this, and I think it's the member service I love, right? I mean, I think that's really important in creating these circles. But the whole governance issue here, and then even looking at the agenda items, the one is going to the ENF to double our cash, and then the second one is ratifying the president of that ENF. Well, should one come out before the other? Is one dependent on the other? And what are the top 21 that are appointing the ENF signing this president currently? And if we don't ratify him, it's not going to change anyways, right? It's literally just in motion, or just in kind of some sort of ceremonial motion that we do, right? So I think the membership service is great. I call it like the Eden core, right? Kind of bringing everybody involved and having everybody earn, but also contribute in every different talent that they have, whether that's tech, marketing, or press, or treasury, or governance. But I think we're ignoring the elephant in the room is the fundamental governance layer. The DPOS layer is broken. It's not working. So every layer that we put upon is building on sand. And that's worrisome to me. And then on the Eden Treasury, it seems like, if you go back to your spreadsheet, just so I understand it correctly. So we're kind of taking some funds that are delegated to the chief delegates that are kind of arbitrary, and we get to decide because we went through an election of how we're going to spend it. We're kind of saying, well, no, you have your funds that you do get, but then we're just going to grab a percentage of that. And we're going to assign it to Circle 1, Circle 2, Circle 3, which is fine. Are you then proposing that these are their own accounts, these own sub-treasuries, if you will, of marketing, tech, and support that are handled by the same team? Is this code that happens through the Treasury? Or is this sort of a manual distribution from the head delegates or the chief delegates to each circle's kind of, on a trust basis?
Yeah, so at the beginning, to start off with, should something like this be voted for, then yeah, the CDs will have to do it manually to start off with. But then we're funding a department, a new tech department, who will be able to quite easily, because the resources available to them now, be able to make the code changes we want in a timely manner. And we should be able to have our own full-time devs to be able to do it, not necessarily full-time, but certainly contracted, and they'll be able to flexible to do that. With regards to each circle's funding, yeah, so like each circle would be allocated a certain amount of funding, and then using your accounting mechanism, they would draw upon that. I don't know if we would send it to another multi-sig. That's a good question, but there would be a balance, and they wouldn't be able to supersede that balance. It may not be smart contracted on day one. We might have to kind of just do it on a spreadsheet or whatever. But once we have our core team in place, then yes, I would want to see it all being done in a smart contract. So it was basically a trustless service. And then with regards to reducing the income, yes, as you can see, this top layer would be the typical income. I have reduced it slightly, but there's no implication on how you spend that. That's kind of for your time. So it could be even less, it could be even more. We could debate that, but it's an actual remuneration for the delegates and the chief delegates for spending a lot of time doing Eden. There should be remuneration for it. And then this obviously leaves us with real budgets to do real work with, without really affecting how the organization works too dramatically. And I do take your point about the elephant in the room, but I think what we learned with Fractally is if you try to, I think evolution is more successful than revolution, but sometimes a good revolution is good as well. So I'm open to ideas, but I didn't want to radically change the way the money and the leadership of the community works on day one, just because I think it will be it could be detrimental. But however, I am suggesting that we do vote on BPs and the ENF, and I do appreciate it is symbolic at this time, but those would form part of my suggested changes to the bylaws. So by voting at this point, at this time, we're demonstrating and creating a precedent for what we believe to be democratic oversight, and we can debate what we should vote on. That's one of the parts of the agenda. But by doing so, and then by adding these new bylaws, we are demonstrating the value to it, presenting it as a new law, and then the new CDs can then choose to ratify those and make them a requirement. So that's my position.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Just one last thing. I mean, if we code it up, we need to access the EDA member table, and we need infrastructure to run that works. So again, I'm not asking for revolution. I'm asking for working infrastructure. I'm not asking for heads to roll. I'm asking for the basic necessity. Eden runs on EOS mainnet. Fact. Eden, as Gracie pointed out, EOS mainnet needs to improve. The infrastructure needs to improve. There's one history node. So how are we going to access the Eden members table? How do we know if we don't have the underlying infrastructure? That's my point. But thank you.
I think that's a fair point, and that's why we have the tech infrastructure circle here to start developing these infrastructures. I understand it's the mainnet issue, but we could vote for BPs to say that if there are BPs who are not pulling their weight, then the CD should call them out. We should vote on that, and we should demand that they either improve, set them a time limit, or create a process to stop them from being ghost BPs, because ghost BPs do no benefit to anyone in the community at all. It's up to us to figure that out, but kind of step by step. First of all, let's take a vote to say that yes, we should be able to have oversight over these organizations. Now we have oversight, let's decide what we use it for.
Edgar, like I've been watching, your work has been geared toward, as a disadvantaged block producer. Your work has been on transparency, and you've been trying to, in your Palmetto project for My Vote EOS, and like the work that you've been doing is all in this direction. Is this something that Eden can do? I'm not asking. I'm not asking. I'm saying, like, this is something that Eden can incorporate into our role. Like, part of our role as a our essence is democracy. Really, it is what defines us, and and maybe part of what, like, a circle that we need to think about is just network intel. Like, we need to be able to show the world, like, why the hell would you invest in EOS right now if EOS at $1.20 can be easily captured, and we see it. We see these massive entities with all the tokens, and they're running the show. What is our pushback against that? It's not brute force. Like, we can't pick up all these tokens and own the network, but that's not the direction we can take. And I think the only direction we can go in is the one that you've been trying to lead in, which is information. And maybe one of these spheres, and I'm not talking about just marketing of Eden, I'm talking about a sphere that is just dedicated to the work that you've been trying to start, which is just your broad description of what DPOS is, what makes us special. It could be a killer app if it was done correctly, if it wasn't captured by non-producing block producers, and value extractors, as you say. Maybe this is something that we should be doing. Maybe the next circle is what is DPOS, and explaining DPOS to the world, and explaining, we've got all this potential here. We've got all this stuff that can work, but right now it's dysfunctional, and it's only dysfunctional because not enough people know about how they could influence the system. They don't know that they could actually take their tokens off of Binance and influence the system in a positive way by voting with them for, appropriate block producers. There's also if we could influence the ENF to, like, please, let's start paying directly the lower tier block producers who are interested in running full history nodes, for example, but just can't be just straight up resources. If there are those entities out there who want to be able to do this and they can't right now because of funding, like, for God's sake, why don't we fund them? And that's something that we can pressure the ENF and the other block producers to do. And whether it's funding them by, by changing their ranking in the order of block production so that they get more funding from the network, or funding them directly to do it. I guess the difference is the governance. The difference is the power to govern the chain. And there's been a lot of talk that we need to separate governance from block production. And how do we do this? But maybe the first step is just the stuff that you've been working on for like years now, which is just transparency. So maybe Eden is the organization that has to develop these transparency tools and really make them big. And maybe this, maybe that's sphere C or D on the spreadsheet there, Michael, that maybe we should be funding that big time, and really make a push towards transparency. Because I know a lot of us have been very anxious about it. And when you see a crash like what we've experienced this week, the actual, sustainability of blockchains is in question right now. And Eden is, EOS is in question right now just because of a low valuation, right? And there's all sorts of bad stuff that can happen when the wrong people are in control of the network, as we have seen this week. Anyway, I'm done.
Just before Gracie comes in, just to say, Edgar, that's kind of like the beauty of this system. As Chuck was saying, one of these circles could be, what is DPOS, and that can be funded by our Treasury, and it can have the elements that you need to deliver that service to improve the BPs throughout. And as head CD, you could lead that circle, and you could start that circle during this term. And that would be really interesting, because we could easily just say, okay, well, we've got marketing tech, we just add another one to these, and we decide how the remaining balance after the delegates fees taken out, how that's spent. This is an arbitrary breakdown. That's 50, 30 and 20. I just, that's how I broke it down for ease of use, but that could be fourth circle, fifth circle, sixth circle, whatever we need. And we can vote to prioritize how that money is spent. But all of a sudden, we actually have some resources to do stuff, right? And I think that's a strong position, because we have to demonstrate to the ENF that we can do stuff. And I think they'll support us in that. That's what they've said they will. Gracie?
Yes. First, you really appreciate your working. It's really great, and then all about the circles and something. But I think the membership service idea is really great, but I kind of a little bit hold back of the just like maybe just scale of this part. I want to talk about something that Chuck said, and I think it's really great. And then I think the way we can really change what the BP's done and what the whole mainnet something, we need a very strong policy. I personally think it's the only way. You cannot do anything. We even cannot make something to punish the bad BPs, the ghost BPs. They're doing really bad job and don't even have a punishment. They just get their money with doing nothing sometimes. And so, but we cannot do anything because they are the people who vote. They vote for the mainnet to change the code, change the rules, change anything. They have the power. And then if we want to change all this, we need a strong policy. And then how can we do that? We need to tell the people who still have yields or who want to invest in yields why you need to support another policy. And we will tell them, we will just tell them to withdraw their yields from the exchange. Just tell them to do that. I think if they understand what they really can infect the whole network and then the whole yields, they will do that because their yields is when their yields is in the market, they're not really not just they are selling the votes and then everything and then make all the central exchanges are all in the BP and doing nothing. And then even when they are not working, we call them several times, didn't answer, didn't fix anything. And then how many hours later they finally respond, it's like that. Their yields is helping them to multiply the price. They're not really have that much yields. Every time when, just like these 2 days, we want to withdraw their yields from the market. It's not gonna happen. They just shut down because they don't have that much yields. What are they doing? They are manipulate the price. And then if you withdraw your yields, it's not just you may help the network to vote for a better BP. You can just avoid so many bad things happen. Maybe they have not enough yields and then the price will be more stable and then the network will be more stable. It's like that. I think really the people need to know of all this. They're not really understand. Even in China, so many people, they're holding a lot of yields, you know, right? But they're just putting there and then just don't want to think about it even because they're so sad. Then they're doing nothing. All their yields is just in their account. It's just like that. They will not do anything because they don't understand. They don't know they still have the chance to change all this. So we need to let them know of all these things. And then we really need a strong process.
I don't know if anybody remembers back to 2011, 2010, Max Kaiser on his RT show, The Kaiser Report, he started this campaign called Crash JP Morgan, Buy Silver. And you saw, I'm not going to attribute it all to him, but the whole concept was we take physical silver out of the possession of the banks and it's going to drive the price of silver up, right? And they're going to lose their power to manipulate the price of silver. And it coincided with his campaign that silver went from, from $20 an ounce, $15 an ounce to $50 an ounce over like 6 months, right? And he was hammering on it, but I'm not going to say it was because of his campaign, but it was, he had the right thing at the right time. But it's exactly what you're talking about, Gracie. You have to, these assets that are being manipulated by banks, by exchanges, we're giving them the power to do that, to perform that manipulation by keeping our assets in those banks or on those exchanges. And if there are, like you say, there are many side benefits to take withdrawing EOS from exchanges. And you can see, right now you see it algorithmically linked with Bitcoin price. You see Bitcoin price go like this, EOS goes like this, and it's all linked, right? And the only way they have that capability is because so much EOS is sitting on those exchanges that they can short and long at their will. And that's not individual traders doing that. That's systemic manipulation. And get it off the exchanges and the whole network will get healthier.
I agree with both of you. And Michael, I think a circle around this, if I would be ecstatic to lead something around this. This is kind of what have dedicated the last couple of years to. Early on in EOS, when we were talking about, the Constitution and user agreement, there's a saying that the only rules that are enforceable are those enforced by token holders, by votes. That's the only thing, right? So that's the only thing that has bite. We can talk all we want. We can put as many bylaws as we want. If no one votes these people out, then it doesn't matter. And that's still the case today. This last week, we probably lost a huge percentage of people in blockchain generally that will never return. And we need to now give them a reason to return and return to EOS. I would say, there is already a proxy that's trying to do this. My Vote EOS is trying to do this outside of Eden. We can do our own. Chris Barnes wanted to do the Eden proxy, right? I don't know how many votes are proxied to him. I know I proxied my small amount of EOS at that point, but we can join the my EOS vote movement, and I would move to vote with our Genesis account. We have 200,000 EOS. Sure, it's not going to move the needle, but it sends a message. How are we going to ask other people to move them out the exchange and vote for a proxy if we're not even voting for ourselves? And I would ask the ENF as well, who's sitting on all that inflation that they receive from BPs, who I understand why they don't want to do this, but I would ask them as well to vote and vote for a proxy or vote for the ones they believe are correct in running infrastructure. That's two small things that we can do right now. We can just grab the keys and vote with Genesis Eden to a proxy of our choice, whether that's ours or my Vote EOS or someone else's. And we can ask the ENF to do the same. The reason they're not doing it is because they're appointed by the BPs that are supporting this same structure. That's my whole point here, right? So why isn't the ENF voting? Why are they not? Block 1 was voting. Block 1 was voting with their votes. Whether you agreed with their votes or not, they were at least voting. So those two small steps we can take right now is voting with ourselves and asking the ENF to vote for themselves.
So I think everyone's points are spot on, and I agree with a lot of that. And I think, I hope that the circles gives us the mechanism to begin doing that, right? So, when you say, why don't we just ask the ENF to do something, or why don't we just tell them whatever to vote? Why don't we start voting? Well, we need that mechanism to do so. So that I hope that the circles will give us that mechanism, because now we have clear lines of delineation. We can vote to say to the ENF, we would like you to do this. We can vote to create the My Vote EOS circle, if you like, and that can be funded, and you can promote that. And we can control that, how that works, and then new CDs can choose to ratify that and improve to keep that circle going or not when they come in. It's a fair democratic situation. I'm going to I think I'm going to move to vote, even if it's rejected, but I think I'm going to move to vote to see if you guys would be interested, firstly, in pursuing this as a member structure and the initial attempts at governance, and then a second vote to talk about requesting more funds to the ENF. So I'll put a motion forward to enact this during our term and to see if it works, and then have the new CDs ratify it as law, obviously, when they come in. So I'm putting that motion forward. Would anyone second that motion?
I'll second that, Michael.
Awesome. Okay, I'm taking a vote now. I would like all in favor of voting to bring this into motion. Please put your hands up. Sweet. And okay, it's a shame Brock couldn't have put his vote forward, but we've still got a majority. Now, the more contested, well, there's two more votes. So the first vote would be to increase the monthly spend from 0.5% or 5% of the Treasury to 15% of the Treasury. So I put forward that motion. Does anyone back that motion?
Once again, this is to increase the monthly distribution from the Treasury from 0.05% to 0.15%, so to triple the monthly distribution.
Correct. So no one wants to back that motion. You're muted.
I've already backed one of them, so I was allowing someone else to.
Sorry, so we're currently at 5% per month.
Yeah, and I want to increase it to 15%.
Well, I will second that. I'll tell you why I'm seconding it, because we're also limiting the mandate to 3 months. Yeah. So it's not like we're necessarily increasing the distribution for ourselves for 6 months. We are increasing it, but we're also having the mandate. So I would second that.
Thank you. All in favor of increasing that spend? Put your hand up. If you're in favor of spending 15%, 5%.
Yeah, just a quick discussion, if we can. Like we have the obvious logistical problem of not possessing the keys for the account right now, right? We can't implement this today anyway, unless there is news that I'm not aware of.
I thought, sorry, Chuck, I thought we would be putting this into bylaws that would then be ratified by the next CDs. Is that not correct, Michael?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I would like to use as much. I would like to test the circles out and the spaces out. But if we can't increase the spend this time, then it would come through next time.
Right. That's my understanding.
Yeah. Yep. So, do you have any more questions on that, Chuck?
Nope. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, all in favor of increasing the spend then to 15% per month? Are you for or against? Yeah. That's the quote of the call. Where's my hand?
I love that move, Gracie. I'm going to use that because I'm just going to raise my hand out of camera. So depending on how it goes. Oh, no, I had it.
And then one final motion. This would be to increase the ENF funding of the Treasury, to re-up us, if you like. So to double our June budget of 181,815 and to double it to 363,631 EOS starting from June to give us the resources we need. Does anyone want to second that motion?
I have a question before kind of moving to that.
Sure.
Originally, Eden started without an ENF. Remember, the first election, actually, Eves ran and didn't make it to a chief delegate and then moved on to start the ENF. The original plan was for the Treasury to be funded from membership, correct? My concern here is that now we become more dependent on the ENF and less dependent on growing membership. Because if our only source of funds was membership, then we'd be focused on requesting more members, not requesting more funds. I understand why we need some activation energy, and the ENF is providing that. But I will voice my concern that, in 3 months, are we going to go and ask them to double again? We become more and more dependent on the ENF, who is 100% dependent on the block producers who, as I just voiced, probably don't like me very much. So I'm concerned that we're becoming way too dependent. Yes, I will second that motion, Michael, with those concerns.
Just before we vote then, I think those are really poignant and important concerns, and we don't want to be dependent on anyone. But we are in a situation where we're trying to move fast, right? This is the year to make EOS work. This is the year to prove the ENF works. And we need a shot of adrenaline in the arm. And there's the only organization that can give that to us, to give us the resources to then, for want of a better phrase, take control for ourselves fully through member services, stipends, and through B2B projects, and through Eden as a software solution. We need the funds to build that, and we just don't have it. At the current rate, we'll dwindle too quickly and we won't develop it. Hopefully, this will be the last payment we should ever need from the ENF. But it would be a huge help to us, and it would see us through 12 months, which is what every startup needs, 12 months of runway to prove itself. And that's all we're asking for, really. So that would be my follow-up.
I would agree with that, Michael. I think we do need that activation energy. I just want to voice that, we need to be mindful of that.
Okay, all in favor of
sorry, just to add really quickly to the discussion.
Go on.
I'm in favor. There's no even consensus on Eden as a I mean, there is consensus. I think there's proven consensus on Eden as a strong organization, but there's still discussion that Eden doesn't really have a role as an organization, where we're just a funding disbursement mechanism, right? And I think that a lack of proper funding for defined circles, as we're talking about here, it's limited everybody's vision of the potential, right? We can't even think in terms of our reaching potential, because we have we're just pigeonholed into this little vision of what we're doing right now, right? And I completely agree that opening up Eden's purpose to the broader network, to be able to impact the network positively and just be brutally honest about the state of the network. That's like blockchain is open source, right? The only chains that are going to make it are public, permissionless, open source chains. Sorry, the only chains that we want to make it are those. And part of that is this other estate of transparency and honesty. And right now, it's not being provided. Obviously, it's not being provided by the vested interests. And we need to be I think that estate that can provide this information, because there are people out there now, and we see it. If you read for example, the EVM developers channel, there are developers coming over from other EVM networks who are like, wow, this is amazing. The potential of this is crazy. And we want them to see that the firmament under this network is strong, right? We want to see that it's transparent. We want to provide transparency to the bones of this network. And if there's any question about the state of DPOS, it's a dead end street, right? Sure, we've got a runway of we've got potential moonshot for a couple of years until these political limitations actually bite us, and until it's captured completely. And if we don't make this happen right now, the full transparency and like a DPOS engagement circle, something like that, we're doing a service to all DPOS chains by providing a service like this, right? And I think this is a tremendous idea, and it seems like, as I said, Eden's essence, its mission is democracy and transparency, and I think that we might be the only organization who can really accomplish this. So I'm in favor of it.
Okay, Gracie, do you have any questions on this?
I think double the current Treasury budget definitely will help us move faster and move bigger and move further. But I kind of like a little bit hold back a little bit of this, but I'm in favor of this. I will vote. But because from my opinion, it's like we should prove something before we ask for more fund. Just personally,
I think that's fair. I think we have to a certain point, proved where we want to go. We want to move fast. We want to improve the network, and we need the resources to do that. So I think we vote with the caveat that we do this once, and we use this to grow and to make Eden self-sufficient. That's why we're doing this. That's our mission with this vote.
I also feel a little confident because the value of our token just dropped 50%. So doubling, we're just back where we started in purchasing power.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's the case.
Yeah.
And all the ENF's contractors are in the same, or the ENF is in the same boat. They understand this, right? Yeah. And that's why the network has not used all of its savings so far on any of its endeavors, is because it's hedging, right? So, there hasn't been something to spend it on, but yeah, there's been a black swan, and it's not just we need to protect ourselves. We need to take this opportunity to really advance EOS, because now we are people are watching us, right? We've got some stuff that's actually happening that we know that the stuff is already in motion, right? But now it's time to really tell the world about it, and that's something that Eden can really take on.
Okay, so I'd like to call the vote then. All in favour of the ENF re-upping us by 100% off June's balance. Raise your hand. Sweet. You hear that, boys? We need some more cash. So give us some more cash. Thank you very much. All right. We've run over quite a bit, and I think we've done a lot of big votes today. So I'm going to probably call the meeting, bring the meeting to an end now, rather than carry on with the rest of the agenda. We can push those into next week. But I would like to put it to the floor if anyone else has anything else they would like to raise or discuss before we end the meeting today.
Just a quick comment. I think increasing the monthly distribution is an acceleration, and doubling our current treasury is a run farther. So we want to run faster and farther. I think both those things accomplish that, or are a right move into it. But let's make sure that we also focus on the underlying network and the infrastructure that we all depend on. But I think this was a great meeting. Thank you very much, Michael, for chairing it.
My pleasure. And I look forward to hearing suggestions on which circles we should form and how they should be funded moving forward, because we'll have those resources now. Right, so I'll conclude today's meeting. I believe Brock will be chairing the next meeting. Is that right? Is it? I can't remember if it's first or second name we're going by.
Well, Brock already, it comes back to me.
Okay, so
I was the one who started. So it goes me, and then Brock, and then Chuck, and then Gracie, then Michael.
Okay.
So
Fantastic.
I will be the next one. I think we'll confirm on Telegram, but we've got it scheduled for Thursday, the 19th, 9 a.m. Eastern time.
Yeah, that should be fine from my side.
Great. I'll circle an agenda hopefully by Wednesday evening.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you all for a very exciting meeting, and we'll see you all next week. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.